We experience sin through moments of loss, hardship, or pain. When we look at the world around us, we see that things aren't the way that they ought to be. And we experience this through broken relationships with God and self and neighbor. Even when we want to improve ourselves, we're faced with the fact that we can't do it on our own. Anyone who has ever made a New Year's resolution to lose 20 pounds and then steps on the scale on March 1st and is 15 pounds heavier, you know what it's like to have a broken will and that there's something within us that's not quite right. Christians believe that through Jesus, God has done something unique in the world, which makes it possible for our broken wills to be fixed and for us to be aligned in our relationships with God and with neighbor. Christians talk about this concept of making things right using a variety of languages. We've used a bunch of metaphors for this, ranging from satisfactory atonement, to moral influence, to Christus Victor, to recapitulation. All of these are big, meaty, $300 theological concepts. Let's look at 4 of these metaphors now. At its heart, atonement means becoming at one with God. And in our first metaphor, substitutionary atonement, in humanity, God sees a broken and sinful creation that has sinned against the honor of God. According to this view, in order to satisfy the honor of God, a perfect payment must be made. And the only payment or sacrifice that is good enough to satisfy this divine justice is God's own Son, Jesus. So the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross is God's way of paying the price of God's justice. A second metaphor is called the moral influence view. According to this view, Christ represents both perfect submission to God and the perfect love of God. Christ is the primary example of what it means to live a life purely devoted to the love of God and the love of neighbor. When we look at Jesus, we see an example of moral perfection, the perfection of love, which changes us in some way. The third metaphor is called the Christus Victor approach. In this ancient view, the brokenness and sinfulness of humanity puts us into actual bondage to the powers of evil in this world, and in order to break that bondage through Christ, God has defeated the devil and freed us from our captivity to sin. The final metaphor is called recapitulation, which literally means getting a new head. In Christ, our broken way of thinking has been cut off, and in place of it, God has transplanted a new way of thinking, a new head of humanity, who is Jesus Christ. Now, the church has debated for years which of these is the right way to describe how we've been made at one with God. Maybe, though, the point is that we have all of these metaphors because salvation is such a tremendous work of grace that it is beyond our human capacity to fully understand it. Even if we can't fully understand all of this and what all of this means for atonement, we can trust that God's love is in all of this and that this is the good news.